right now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. As part of our Reopening Boulder series, also being mindful that reopening has changed in the way it looks now versus where it was 3 weeks ago. We're still hopeful and we're still looking at this as a reopening of our own club. So I'd like to introduce Jonathan Lev. He is the Executive Director of the Boulder JCC. He's been in that role for more than a decade, leading a $30 million fundraising project to develop this new campus with an annual budget going from $1 million all the way up to $5 million today. He has a bachelor's degree, 2 bachelor's degrees from CU, and he's got 2 master's degrees from NYU. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Jonathan.
We're going to make sure technology works here. So first of all, it gives me incredible pleasure to be able to be here with you today. I know for all of you who haven't had a chance to be able to meet in person very many times, I know there was one other time for Rotary Club outside. It's a really special moment to be able to come together and see each other and eat together. That's something that our community is all about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey as the JCC during COVID and a little bit about what we've done and how we've made decisions. I'm going to touch on things briefly, but I'm sure there's some areas you may have more interest in. So feel free to ask the questions of me, and I'll get started here. So on March 9th of last year, I called an emergency meeting of my senior team. This is the senior team right here. That's not a picture from that day. There were a lot more panicked faces at that point than this. And we sat down to try to figure out what we were going to do. We saw the impending pieces of what were coming and knew that some decisions were going to have to be made very quickly. And our operations directors stopped us before we got started in that meeting and said, well, what are we going to do to be able to make decisions? What are the values that are going to drive us as an organization? And together, we actually came up with what ended up becoming 7 primary values for us to be able to make decisions during COVID. And now we've realized that not only these values, COVID, they're actually our guiding values for decision making that we use for everything that we're doing at the JCC, from what healthcare we're going to use, or should we be playing outside or inside, or should we have this kind of program or not. There's so many different ways that we've been able to utilize these as an organization. A couple that really, really stuck out with us in terms of how we've led during this entire time. This transparency and honesty has been so important. And so a lot of what we've done is when we don't know information, we're saying that we don't know it. When we know something, we're going to share what we know. And it's living with that uncertainty, and I heard Chad mention that a little bit, and I think everyone here knows it. The only constant right now is that there is change, and we all know that in everything that we're doing. So these values really have guided us. And the other thing that we thought about was, who are we? Who are we as an organization, and how are we going to allow ourselves to be able to be fruitful during a time that may be very different from what we've done in the past? And so this idea of convening, well, convening is what we always thought of as this. We're bringing people together, we're bringing people to have interactions with one another, but how can we do that in a virtual environment? What does that look like when we close our school and have to do convening of our families and even early childhood children virtually? So these are the things that we thought about of continuing to be able to create community, convene, and making sure that we are caring throughout all of it. So immediately after this meeting, things escalated extremely quickly, and we were closed almost only a couple days after this. And closed, by that I mean our building was closed. We never closed. And people talk about reopening. We've been open this entire time. And that's part of the framework that we've stayed in terms of our organization and how we've led in terms throughout COVID. But the couple things that were really big highlights for us were creating an immediate COVID response team. So this was an internal staff team, mostly our leadership team, but there was an additional communications component that we added to it. And then lastly on here, you'll see this reopening task force. That's what we called it at the time, and so we reframed it to opening task force once we determined our framing of things. But this reopening task force was made up of cross-departmental. It was every different department in our organization, because we realized that so many different things of how we operate impact one another. Because we can't run a meeting like this without having our AV involved, our rentals involved, our facilities involved, our reception involved to welcome you all here, for me to know that you're going to be here and come in and say hello. There's so many different aspects of what we're doing that interact with one another. And so we took, from this time, we created a phased approach to our opening. And ultimately it had 4 components, 4 phases to it. And the big factors that we took into consideration in all of the phases were these factors. From financial to understanding what the policies and procedures and other things, and you can read what those are. Each of them interplayed with one another and really helped us try to figure out what we were going to do at different points. So, sorry, this partially came up. But the phased opening that we had basically started with phase 1. Phase 1 for us, after we closed our building, and after we closed our school in person, this was from March all the way to May, and we didn't even, we made a decision to not charge any of our families any tuition during this period. We had no rentals during this period. I'll go into the finances and the impact of that, which is pretty significant. But we made a decision to open as of June 1 of last year for our school. And the reason why we did that was we realized that our essential workers in our community needed help. They had no child care. I was looking at my own family, and my wife was a nurse at the hospital, and we were trying to figure out our own child care and how are we going to be able to do this. And this was an essential need, and everything in our power as an organization was focused on how do we open this school and how do we open camp for the summer. So we did it. And we did it during that phase, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the impacts of that in a bit. And we've led up all the way to where we are today, which is phase 4. Phase 4 is the essential full opening of the JCC. The only thing we're not doing right now is allowing or welcoming walk-ins, so to speak. It's basically, if somebody shows up and wants to come in the building, they totally can. But our door is currently locked, and we're not just saying, come here and work out of the JCC like we had before, because we just don't have the staffing yet to be able to manage it. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's that we don't have the staffing. The second factor that everyone's fully aware of, and I've gotten 7 questions today about, is what's happening tomorrow with the Delta variant and other things, and the answer is, I don't know, and I don't think any of us know. But we're all aware that changes are possible, and what this phased approach allows us to do is we could toggle from this full opening, phase 4, to phase 3B or phase 3A at any given time. And so we know all of the things that we as an organization can do to make that happen. So over this last year and a half, we have been incredibly successful. I'm really proud of all the things that we've been able to do, and as an organization, we're in a strong place. And the keys to that success were the fact that we were able to manage and mitigate risks throughout this entire time. One of the things that is always present for all of us is that there's always dangers, but now there's even more so. And so how do we think about them in a different way, and how do we approach them so that we can be as thoughtful around them as possible? And the other things that really were forefront for us were this values-based decision-making, this laser focus. And by that I mean, once we opened the school, we said our number 1 top priority is to keep our school open. Because by fall of 2020, we opened for 150 kids in our school. And we've been one of the longest running schools that's been open since we opened in June of 2020. The other thing is that our leadership and staff have been incredible during this entire time, board, staff, and the leadership team that I work with. We've met constantly. Our financial management has been tremendous, and the leadership around that has been so important, and I'll go into some details about what we did. And this community piece, transparency, but philanthropic support has been one of the keys as well. So a little bit an overview of finances, because everyone always wants to know, like, how did you survive? And the answer is, it was really painful. And really hard. I didn't know what I was going to do in March and April of last year. I built financial models, and there were too many variables that I couldn't come up with an outcome that actually worked. And one of the saving graces that was actually out there was this PPP loan. And I know for many businesses it was a saving grace. And for us, it meant that we actually did not let any of our staff go. We paid everyone entirely and fully through June. And we, at a time when we had 0 earned revenue. So our normal monthly basis, we have almost $300,000 of earned revenue and philanthropic support. So this was a big change for us. And as of this year, for 2021, we were able to build a balanced budget. And the way we were able to do that was the PPP loan forgiveness. And we actually, for our first loan, got 100% forgiveness, which was huge for us. And almost 1.4 million or so of PPP loan we got. In terms of earned revenue lost, that's $1.5 million that we lost over the course of COVID. Rentals is a huge component, and this is where you all fit into this. For us, the annual rental earned revenue for us is around $500,000 now. So we've lost well over that at this point because we've had nominal rentals. So it's been a big shift for us as an organization to try to recoup that and also cut expenses. So the other thing that we did significantly was reduce expenses. So the big things that I just want to highlight was the summer of 2020, we actually had to make some significant changes. So once the PPP loan ran out, we actually had to cut our year-round staff by around 29%. And the way we did that was, luckily, our teachers mostly don't work during the summer. We hired only a handful to be able to run this extremely modified, very small program over the summer. And many of our other staff went into seasonal roles instead of year-round roles. So somebody would become a seasonal teacher where they were an administrator before. And so people stepped in and we paid people in their normal salary for a different role, but we were able to keep them employed during that time. We also had to do some furloughs. It was a very small amount. I think it was 6 positions that were furloughed, but we also had hiring freezes. So anytime anybody left, we didn't rehire those positions. But what it's meant is by 2021, we were able to build a balanced budget and of around 80% of the revenue and 80% of the expenses of what we had previously. So we were a $6 million plus budget. This year we're closer to $5 million. And just to give you an idea of org chart, this is what we were pre-COVID. This is what we went to. It was a dramatic shift. This is 1, this is 2. You don't need to read all the names and everything on there. You just see the idea of what I'm talking about in terms of changes. But one of the things that we realized to be able to do this was that we had to focus on the staff we had. It's so important to keep your people happy at a time where you know that they're going to constantly be dealing with adversity. So some of the things that we did was we constantly were communicating with them. We had weekly staff meetings. I did staff video updates on a regular basis at times that we couldn't pull everyone together. We kept communications lines open. They were able to ask really honest questions about, is my position going to be here tomorrow? So we were really honest with what we knew at different times. The other thing that we did was we created an emergency fund for our staff, which allowed them to get up to $500 a month. It was managed by Jewish Jewish Family Service. Is completely anonymous. They could get up to 3 months worth of funding. So we created this emergency fund because it wasn't just our staff members who were affected, it was staff member partners or spouses or other people in their lives that they were helping support at different points. So we did that as well. And mental health. We actually changed our health insurance during the pandemic to enable 100% free telehealth for all people who are on our health insurance. And for that, they get free mental health services, 100%, psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers. And so there's been over, I think it's something like 80 different visits that have happened from our staff through this free mental health services. The other things that's happened during COVID, and when I say we've been successful, is our community impact has been enormous. And at first I kept on saying that we as an organization have never done less, but we've never communicated about it more. And as I started looking, actually we were doing more than we had ever done before. It was just different. It just looked a little bit different. And so some of the things that we were doing, we were incrementally impacting the community. We're making sure that we were present and helpful in ways that the community needed. And we were staying connected to the needs of the community at different points. So as I mentioned, the opening, this reopening of the school, once that happened in June, these were the teaching staff. This was it. I mean, we normally have 47 people who are running our school. This group of teachers came in at a time when none of us knew anything. They didn't know what tomorrow was gonna look like. The health department didn't have regulations. We had to create everything from ourselves, and they were at the front lines of being able to do it. And the kids didn't know the difference. They had the best summers of their lives. And they had the best school years of their lives. And by the fall, we were able to open up fully, such that we had 150 students. We had teen programs happening on site. About 40% of our students received some type of tuition assistance. Specifically, scholarship was about 20%. So that number went up significantly to try to make sure that we could support our families. But we also kept our essential services in other ways going. We have a farm. I don't know how many people have been out on the farm or seen the farm. Okay, if you haven't, when you walk out today, there's a barn over in the corner. Walk out over there. See what's going on. And what's happening is we've got all of these fields that we harvest on a weekly basis, and all that food is donated through Boulder Food Rescue. It goes to EFA, Community Food Share, Bridge House, and a number of other organizations to be able to bring food to the community. And we also do education on that farm. The education stopped, but the food did not. And we wanted to make sure we continued doing that. We also ran food drives here, and we ran actually one in partnership with you in Rotary, but we did a number of others as well. We also ended up running 5 blood drives. There was a need in the community, and we were one of the only sites that they felt comfortable having these on. So we actually did, in the summer, last summer, when they had shut every single blood site down, we were able to welcome them into this space right here and bring blood to our community. The other thing that was happening is our teens weren't able to interact with anyone. And so we made a priority to try to have teen programming here on site. So a couple times a week, we brought 10 teens or so together to be able to interact. And the impact on them was huge. They really felt that it was the one way that they were able to keep themselves motivated and less stressed throughout the year. And lastly, we pivoted a lot of the stuff that we did online and actually reached more people than we've ever reached before. So 10,000 people. We think this is an estimate. It's really hard to figure out these numbers because of Zoom and other pieces, but it's estimated around 10,000 people have participated in our programs, and we've actually had a global reach. So we've partnered with all kinds of organizations when we've had events that have been interesting and unique or something that people have wanted to partner on. And so we've now I was on a Zoom where there was somebody from South Africa, somebody from France, and somebody from California. And then there was a bunch of people from Boulder. So one of the things that we've realized is we have an ability to reach more people. It doesn't mean that we're going to lose sight of the fact that we are a hyper-local organization. Our impact is really supposed to be and is going to be on Boulder, but if we can impact others in the way that they're approaching the world and the way that they're able to connect with others, we're going to do that as well. And to go finally into where we sit today for rentals, because people are always interested, what's going to happen with this? So last summer, we had, this was the first attempt at having an on-site event. It was the Boulder Symphony. They had an event where we were able to do social distancing and health checks and other pieces outside. It was a great event. So there was that. Then there was the Boulder Rotary Homecoming, which was a pretty great event that some of you were able to come to. And that led us, with each of these different successive things, to try to figure out how we were going to do the next event, which led to ultimately in May, the first, I'll call it larger scale event, which is about the size of what we're having here today in this room with one of our business partners. And so the ability for us to bring back rentals is pretty important, and we want to continue to focus on it. And in terms of health department guidelines, we're going to continue to watch what they're saying we should be doing and how we approach it. We're all waiting with bated breath until next Tuesday. It's coming out, the next set of guidelines for schools and other things in our community, and we don't know. I think one of the things that somebody asked me the other day said, how are you going to make decisions about what you're going to do? We're going to continue to keep the health and safety of this community at the forefront. It's one of our top priorities based on our values. And we're going to look to our health department for guidance. It's so important that we can't make decisions on our own front without looking to them for the guidance. And whereas before, our number one priority last year was keeping our school open, and that meant that because we had to figure out how to do that. Well, now it's also to be able to bring back events like this and other aspects of our organization as well. So we haven't stopped thinking about the future. I'm constantly thinking about that. And luckily, I don't know, it was about 6 to 8 months ago, things opened up enough because we had made all of these decisions and sort of been in a place of we know what the daily operations is going to be like, that I started thinking about the future. One of the things that I'm looking at, and I know I've been asked by some of you before, is we're looking at opening up a coffee shop here or a little cafe, so that after you're done with your meetings, if you want to hang out and have a cup of coffee. So this is something I'm working on right now. We're also looking at a couple of other projects like redoing our playground and other pieces. So we luckily are in the financial position to be able to look at these projects as possibilities for our future. And we're also celebrating huge milestones. So we passed this 1-year celebration of our reopening last June, but really importantly, in September, we're celebrating 5 years of being in this building. And you have been a big part of that time period with us. And we're hopefully, if all things go well, in September having a 5-year celebration anniversary here with outside with food trucks and concerts and other things. So we'll make sure that you're all invited to it and can join us. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions and see what you all have and are curious about. So thank you for having me today.
Jonathan, you talked about the Early Childhood Center. Mm-hmm. Who are the students that you serve in that center?
It's a great question. So we serve students ages 10 weeks all the way up through kindergarten. One of the things that we ended up doing in the fall of last year, we had such demand for our kindergarten because it was in person. So if anyone knows Boulder Valley School District and St. Vrain, we're not in person, so we added an additional classroom for that. In terms of the makeup of those students, it's the makeup of Boulder. It's a cross-section of all the different families that are here, and we give equal access to everyone in terms of it's on a basis of whenever anyone applies to come in, they come in, and we're not basing it on whether they're a scholarship student or not. They can apply for a scholarship. And we give away around 10% of our gross a year. It's over $200,000 of scholarship on an annual basis.
I know you have goats over there. Can I bring my grandchildren out to see the goats?
Great question. Okay, so on a normal basis, yes. During COVID, we've been a little bit more cautious about it in terms of just opening up our farm to stop by. So right now, it's not fully open to the public yet, but it will be. But if you stop by with your grandchildren during the week and we're able to accommodate it, we will. But once we open more fully, we will. We actually have 2 sets of different goats there. So for those that know goats, goats are incredible weed eaters. So we actually have fields that they eat the weeds of. There's a bunch of goats that do that. And then we also have, we board a bunch of milking goats every year. And we bring in a buck every year. His name was Jerome the last year. And Jerome the buck actually helped to have babies. And so now we have a couple of new babies and some mothers that are milking right now. But in due time, and we also have a couple of events where people can register to be able to come and see the goats. So that's what we have right now. Normally it would be to stop by.
Jonathan, thanks for speaking to the club. Much appreciated. Yeah. I consider our JCC an ethnically based organization.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I consider our JCC to be an ethnically based organization. And my question is, I wonder what the ethnically based part helped you get through the virus? What strengths did it have, or weaknesses, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll frame the way you're saying it slightly different in terms of how I use language. We are a cultural institution. I wouldn't use the term ethnic necessarily. And cultural means that we have a basis in a culture, and that this is Jewish culture. And we're not a religious-based organization. We're actually an education-based organization. Just like Rotary is here to, there's speakers every week to be able to have everyone learn. That's the same concept of what the JCC is here to do. In terms of COVID, what it's been, some of the things that have been really helpful are the network of other organizations, of Jewish organizations throughout the country that have helped us navigate different points. So there's an organization called the Jewish Federations of North America. And when the PPP loans were coming out, their webinars were the best in the country. So much so that I have a couple of nonprofit partners here in Boulder. I invited them to join me on these webinars so that we could all learn together about what's happening. Because it wasn't about us as Jewish, not Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Sikh. In this community, we all needed to work together, and whether we were a culturally based organization or not, we had a lot to learn from one another. And I think that's one of the things that helped us was having this strong network of other organizations. And I know for others that was really helpful. The other thing was in terms of values. People ask about this religious values. Our values are human. They're human values. It's like, how do we treat one another? What does it mean to actually take care of one another and be in community with one another? And I think that those values have been a driving force for us in making sure when we were saying we're going to reopen, but we're going to prioritize families of essential workers when we first opened. That was driven by our values of health in community, which is rooted in Jewish values. So that's what I'd say. So thank you. getting a workout here.
Thank you for speaking to the club. I enjoyed your presentation. It seemed very comprehensive. I was wondering, are there things that you didn't do that you wish you had done in retrospect?
Ooh. For the most part, I've felt really good about what we've done. I'm trying to think if there were like specific bigger moments. There were smaller little things at different times where we felt like we didn't communicate as quickly as we could have. And that was more because of capacity, but it was is what we said to ourselves, but it really was a decision of priorities. And so we were prioritizing doing versus communicating, and sometimes it's important to actually prioritize the communicating first. So that was one thing. I'm trying to think of the other things. Other than I wish I wasn't losing my mind as much during March through May. I was working probably 19 to 20 hours a day to try to figure things out. And we had incredible support to do it. I mean, unbelievable support here. It's just when you realize you can't control anything, and there's everyone else can't either, but they think that they can control the, whether it's a board, control the organization, or staff can control their work. You're living in a time where there's so many unknowns, and so I think if we had even been more clear about that, that no one really has control right now over our future, that would have been a little bit important. But in retrospect, I feel great about what we did, and I feel really good about the choices we made over time. But we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. This year and next year are relatively stable for us in terms of finances because of the PPP loans. It's 2023 that has me a little bit worried if we can't fully be operationalized by that point. And so that to me is a big question mark in my mind right now.
Great job, Jonathan. The JCC is a tremendous asset for the Boulder area. I was wondering, prior to the 5 years that this facility has been here, can you give me a brief history of the JCC?
Sure. Some of you have heard this because I think I was one of your first speakers when you came here, and I did a little bit of a historical lesson for the JCC. But we started as a preschool in 1984 with 5 kids. And it was somebody who said they wanted to start a preschool, a Jewish preschool was the idea at that point. And it grew over time and moved into a 2-room schoolhouse on Glenwood, and ultimately in 2000, we purchased the building that's on Kalmia by the soccer fields, cemetery. It's actually Friends School, if you pass it now, their middle school. So we bought that at the same time that a foundation had bought all of this land. And the intention of this land was to be able to build a JCC in the future, as well as bring other organizations and other nonprofits onto the campus. There were a lot of fits and starts of capital campaigns between 2000 and what ultimately ended up being 2016 by the time we moved in here. I started in 2010, and the capital campaign for this building had just started. We started designing the building in 2011, and with a long city process, received approval. It would be a lot longer right now, but it was because we were going for a trifecta. It was like an annexation, zoning change, usage variance. I mean, it was like an impossible thing we were asking for in some ways, but because of some great partnerships and some great community and a lot of fortitude, we were able to open in 2016. And prior to being in this building, I would say that we were an organization that primarily served a subset of this community. And when we opened here, our intention was to be a community organization, which is a very big difference for us in terms of shifting our mission and how we were operating. And when I say hyper-local, I like to use that because we're not close to anyone. I mean, there's about 1,000 homes, which is not very many, within a mile radius of us. But we are not far from everyone in Boulder County. It's like 15, 20 minutes from almost anywhere you are in Boulder County to get here. So that being central, even though we're not central to downtown or North Boulder or other places, we are actually central to Boulder County, and that's what we were intending to do and serve when we opened this space.
Wonderful. We're just going to ask anybody online, Cassidy, if you have any questions.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for being with us again today. I apologize, I don't remember your inaugural appearance as a speaker before our group, but
no problem.
Maybe I wasn't at the meeting. It's clear from what you were talking about and showing us today that our organizations have been on similar trajectories for the last year and 5 months. And on a personal level, one of the things that gave me hope was when I started to see the kids outside at the Jewish Community Center again. I drive by here several times a week, and when I started seeing the kids outside, I was like, you know, we're going to get through this. And Rotary's version of hope is the End Polio Now campaign, which we've been involved in for 35 years. And as a way of expressing our gratitude for being here with us today, our club is going to donate 100 doses of polio vaccine in your name to our Rotary campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you all. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you more, and I hope it continues so that we can all be in person consistently. So thank you all. Thanks so much.
There's one line that stuck out to me. The kids didn't know the difference. I mean, if that doesn't speak to the experience you guys try to create, I don't know what does. And I think that's why we love being here so much, is you're such a vital part of our meeting experience. So thank you guys for all you do.